Welcome, beautiful creatures, to the Lightness of Being podcast, where we celebrate the dance of life and explore ways to find joy, laughter, and lightness, even when faced with challenges. Join me, your host, Monika Stefanik, as we step into the light and discover a realm of potential and possibilities for greater ease in our lives. Let's laugh, learn, and grow together. Greetings, beautiful beings, and welcome to episode 12 of the podcast, I think. Is that a good number?
It's an amazing number for many reasons.
Okay, maybe we'll get into that too. I'm joined by this beautiful woman, artist, herbalist, and astrologer, Jasmine.
Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, you're welcome. What is something you're celebrating right now?
I guess, well, I just had a birthday, so it's been a week of celebrations.
You're Pisces.
But yeah, Pisces, celebrating Pisces and just breakthroughs, I feel like, that have been a long time coming. A lot of hard work put in and just like feeling like this is a year of new beginnings in a lot of ways. Feels good. And I think collectively, we're all kind of feeling that at this time too. So yeah, there's a lot of like endings and beginnings happening.
Yeah. Big endings. Big beginnings. How long ago was your birthday?
3 days ago.
Oh, happy birthday. Solar return.
Yep.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, so exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and Puma. I was just messaging her the other day, and I was like, I was feeling you. How are you doing? She's like, oh, you're probably feeling my birthday. I was like, oh, yeah, that's right.
It's funny how that happens, for sure.
Happens always.
Sweet.
Well, welcome. I don't know, like, what is going on right now? Like, what's happening? What is like our wild astrological bodies? Like, what is going on? I mean, I know we have eclipse officially tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow night. So we're recording this the day before the big, like, total lunar eclipse. So
yeah,
we've been in that building energy for a few days for sure. And then we're also in the midst of Venus retrograde, which is huge. And then we get Mercury retrograde the day after the eclipse. And then Neptune changes signs for the first time in 14 years. And then we get a second eclipse. So this is like the gauntlet of 2025. And oh my God. Yeah, it's pretty wild and exciting. But yeah, the Virgo South Node eclipse tomorrow is definitely one that's, I think, catalyzing a lot of, I think we get to look at the ways that like our mental processes of organization and like always being busy and productive have created like false illusions of security, and those are all kind of going away because no amount of busyness or distractions or studies or just neurosis really is going to help quell the like kind of just
hole that's just
that
inside.
I think we just have to sit in for a while. It feels like, I mean, the sun's conjunct Saturn right now as well. And so tomorrow will still be conjunct Saturn for the eclipse. And so there is this kind of just like pit feeling to sit in. That's like, there's no escaping the cosmic pit of karma.
And
it's
a lot,
so
though.
Yeah, I mean, it's just sitting in that liminal space and getting as comfortable as you can with that for a little while. Like, it will change, but culturally that's not a thing that people are comfortable with. And so
yeah,
there's Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like it's really helpful just because inaction is the action. Just sit in it. Because right now I'm kind of feeling, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm noticing that, but also I'm like, but what am I supposed to be doing? Or like, I'm supposed to be taking these actions and doing these other things. And I just kind of feel like all over the place. And then again, the constant theme is surrender and letting go, right? So it's really always. But just like knowing that the only thing to really do right now is to just sit here with it.
Yeah. You know, with Saturn being so present with that, it is like Saturn demands sacrifices. And so there's something like sacrificial about allowing yourself to dissolve into that void space. Not in like a disembodied way, like just going and getting high or something.
No, but in like
Nothing
an
against
aware,
that, but like in like a more conscious, like making it a sacred act. That's maybe some more like still has like an interesting paradox of like having some like structure and discipline behind the intention of it.
Sacredly surrendering.
Yeah. And, you know, the eclipse is ruled by Mercury, which is slowing way down and really potentizing in its build up to its own retrograde the day after. So, I mean, I think the intensity of like the mental hits to people's egos is also really strong with Mercury being in Aries, which is also that like very instinctive and like headstrong space. It's just really wild energy right now.
Keep having these waves of I'm like, I'm okay and I'm not okay. And like, and I'm not talking like days between, like moment to moment to moment. Like,
well, and I think some of that is that Aries energy too, because so Mercury and Venus are both around 8 or 9 degrees in Aries, which is very fast moving and just like go, you know?
Energy of spring.
Yeah, it is. It's like, I mean, we've kind of had first spring here. We're kind of heading into second winter now. But so it's interesting. I mean, that reflects really that like this in between time of like these planets are going back and forth across like, you know, the last degrees of Pisces, which is the end of the zodiac and like the world ending degree of 29 Pisces. And then like the world birthing and creation point of like 0 degrees Aries, which is that equinox point. And so like Mercury and Venus have already gone over it once. They're about to retrograde back over it these next couple weeks.
Okay.
In the midst of that, Neptune's going to cross that point, which Neptune hasn't been in Aries since like 1860 or something.
Do you know anything big that happened in 1860 when that happened last?
It was right around the Civil War.
Oh, okay.
When they were murdering all the buffalo.
Oh, we don't love that.
There's that. The first thing that pops in my head. But then that's going to retrograde back to Pisces by the end of this year. And then like, you know, in a few months, we'll have Saturn crossing that like world ending and world beginning point as well and retrograding back again to cross it again next year. So there's definitely like the ending and beginning, which is already a theme of eclipses.
Yeah.
Is just amplified with all of these planets crossing back and forth over the like that degree. And those, you know, in if you want to get real nerdy in astrology, there's
always
each zodiac sign, which has 30 degrees in it, is separated into decans. So it's like 10 degrees. So there's like 3 sections of each sign that each have their own planetary ruler. And so the last 10 degrees of Pisces from 20 to 30 to 21 to 30 degrees of Pisces, and then the first 10 degrees of Aries from 0 to 9 degrees are both ruled by Mars. And that's because it takes a lot of energy to die and for things to end. And it takes a lot of energy to like birth and give birth. And so like all of this has this like underlying Martian energy too, where it's just like intensely aggressive or passive aggressive in Pisces realm more. But it's just like agitating and you see it just in like people's behavior lately. I mean, it's just like everybody, there's like a lot of just like kind of sharp edges being everywhere. And so I think the more consciousness you can bring to your own inner process of like, what is asking to die? And
really reevaluating.
yeah, like, I mean, with Venus retrograde, like it's really reevaluating your value systems, the ways you show up in relationship, not only with other people, but with yourself. And like, I mean, with Aries, it's definitely about like how you self-identify and like what, yeah, I don't know, just like the ways you kind of like instinctually throw yourself into relationships with other people, and then how that reflects upon your own like comfort with your own self, being in your own skin. And then, I mean, money is a big thing with Venus as well, which we're seeing just collectively with all of the crazy stuff about like the evaluations of like, or reevaluations of like currency, gold, crypto, all of that's like kind of up in the air.
I did not know
in really
that.
interesting
That's
ways.
good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. I've like kept myself back from so much right now because I'm just like,
Yeah.
I know it's all gonna I mean,
it's just all changing.
Yeah.
And
So I'm like, we're
changing
just
with it.
in the chaos of change right now. And so it's like,
Yeah.
it seems insane in a way to try to follow it or grasp it or do, because it's just like the next day, at the next moment, it's going to be so vastly different. So like you said, just kind of like being with all of it right now. That like the sharpness of the Aries energy while we're in Pisces season is so weird. It's so weird because I'm just like all emotional and just like feeling like in these beautiful like waters one moment, and then I'm like, oh, the next moment,
rage. Yeah. And you know, I would say too, it's like with Pisces being like that oneness, which is that ultimately what all of our souls are like striving to return back to, like that divine source of creation. The only ways we do that are by discovering the places that it's like broken and disconnected
in our relationships,
in everything. So, you know, the actual spiritual path is a fucking doozy.
Yeah.
Discovering
that more, I'm like, oh, what did I sign up for? Okay. Okay, cool, we're here. We're doing it. It's fine. It's fine. Casual.
Yeah. And I think with Saturn there too, it's like we're really, I mean, there is a kind of harsh reality settling in for more and more people as those illusions of like what that actually is and what that actually looks like fall away more and more. I think once Neptune, the ruler of Pisces, which is that like divine creative source, as well as all of the illusions that are overlaid on it by humans and twisted around. I mean, once that hits Aries, I think there's not like a final dropping of veils of illusions, but there's definitely like a crescendo of that, of and a lot of maybe veiled or masked, I mean, just kind of violence, aggression, hatred, that's like kind of been masked and under the surface in a lot of ways. Feels like it's going to kind of, in a way, get like permission to come out. I mean, to me, Neptune in Aries has a very Crusades vibe. I've said that for a long time.
When does that shift?
The end of March, for the first time. The good thing about, I mean, the flip side of that too, though, I mean, it's not all just going to be that. It's definitely like whole new, like dream structures and like just inspiration, new kinds of I don't know, like new inspiration for arts and creative things, and kind of like paradigm busters in a way too. Like I think breaking new ground on some new kind of perspectives and understandings of spirit will also break through. But yeah,
Yeah, just like laying new ground.
for sure.
Everything's
It's
gotta
going to be a
like
lot faster movement too, though, because just like all the outer planets are this year now shifting from like water, earth to fire and air,
oh,
which is much more dynamic.
yeah.
So we get the first taste of that early this year. And then end of the year, they kind of go back to water and earth for a while. But then 2026 is when it's really just on.
Wow. It's like we're just getting a little taste right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, we'll go back, let you guys settle for a hot second, and then we're like gonna really dive in.
Yeah.
Wow.
That'd be great.
You sound great. We're doing fine.
So good.
So like, I don't know. I mean, like besides just sitting in it, like what's a way to begin to navigate? Because this is just the start of so much change that's about to shift and occur. And like you're saying, like the breaking down of like these structures and these paradigms that we've held for so long.
One, I mean, the biggest piece I would say is, and it looks different for everybody because everybody's in different states of process and whatever, and everybody's soul have different objectives of what they're doing too. But ultimately, going within and really, I mean, it's like the process of individuation.
Yeah.
Of, really removing those deep collective threads that hold people enslaved to these old systems that really are not making it through this next era, I would say. And I mean, that looks like a ton of different things, but, it, they're all inside jobs. It's all about going within, understanding that all of these like big, potentially terrifying collective shifts are reflections of what humans have done and created for so long. And like, let's say we all have soul and karmic pieces of that within ourselves. And so it's like, we don't really get to see the outer changes that we want until we look within and heal those places in ourselves. And it takes a lot of time and energy and surrender and, and again, like not everybody's meant to do that in the same way. Like it's like looking at, all the natal charts that I read for people. It's like we all have vastly different missions. And this whole idea, which I think is another kind of like Neptune Aries, like fantasy that like everybody has this like one path of like what we need to be doing and like how we're forging ahead. And like there's one way to God. All of that is like, none of that's real. We all have kind of our like contracts and missions and roles to play. And we all have our own personal karma and like what our soul's here to learn. And so one, just holding that, knowing that your personal journey is not going to look like anybody else's is really important, I think.
Or that anyone else's.
Or that anybody else's is going to look like yours and that you can force them into that.
That's kind of where I get stuck. Like, but why are you doing it like I'm doing it? And why is that causing friction?
And then I mean, that's when you can look at two charts together and understand those like tension points and like really we call soul growth opportunities of like how you're both like poking and prodding each other to evolve, ideally, based upon how those planets are interacting and communicating. And I mean, so much, so many significant relationships from what I see when I'm also looking at like synastry charts and stuff. It's like, people coming back together again for how many times past to continue working through karmic patterns or trying to like reharmonize something from a past life, or which it's just fascinating how they like ripple into like these past life stories ripple into this life. And like not the exact same scenario, but there's definitely like reflections of the power dynamics that were happening then. And maybe they like flip flop this time, or, but when you can start to access some of that deeper material and like start to understand your life and relationships with that much bigger perspective, it can give you a lot of context for why things have played out the way they have for you in this life. Why there's like specific people you just like can't get out of your life, or why specific people suddenly leave, or like, I mean, so many things. But it's really been pretty profoundly informative for me of like getting to look at some of that stuff just in my own life of like family members and friends and whatever.
It's kind of like being an observer of it from that like curious space of like, curious. Do you feel like when people leave all of a sudden that's like, okay, karmic contract done, or whether or not it's karma or just
I mean,
contract,
I've
like
seen that
complete
for sure. For whatever we were supposed to do this lifetime, great, that seems done. There's other ones that have been like, I'm not really sure what happened. I guess that, I don't know, I'm just trusting that that was perfect. And Venus retrograde, one of the like signatures of this time we're in right now, which really started March 1st, goes to like April 12th, is like old loves or relationships, people like showing back up in your life to like finish maybe some like loose ends that need to be tied up. And it could reflect back to the last Venus retrograde that was in Aries and Pisces in the same place in your chart from 8 years ago, which would have been like spring of 2017. So you can look at that period in your life. You can look at the spring of 2009, which would have been the one before that, and then like 2001. All of those, like Venus repeats her retrogrades in 8-year cycles in the same place in our charts, but in like 5 different places because they're every year and a half. So this is like a continuation of like a thread from 2017, most likely for most people. Definitely is for me.
Wow.
Yeah. Which was another huge transition point in my life.
Yeah. So do you feel like, I mean, it's not really a generalization, but the people that are coming in during this period of time, is it mostly to complete those contracts, or do you feel like they're going to stay, or I mean, I know it's
I mean, it's kind of a mixed bag. I generally advise people that when people show back up in their lives, or like a new relationship suddenly shows up in your life during a Venus retrograde, I wouldn't bank on it being forever. I'm sure there's plenty of people that could prove me wrong with that. But generally,
we also like to force things as humans.
Yeah, just hold on to things forever and ever and ever. Amen. I feel like usually there is some sort of like review process that's happening, whether it's an old person showing up or even a new person showing up, but they're still like embodying that same like pattern of like relating, or there's like a resonant like frequency that gets drawn out of you, where you get to like kind of maybe replay the same relationship dynamic with them as to somebody else, or you're like, a family pattern
yeah,
from childhood that you like we're kind of like imprinted with, and like when you were raised and your first like relationships, which tend to be with our parents.
Yeah.
So many possibilities.
Possibilities.
Mhm.
So if for someone like none of that happens, is that kind of like, oh, well, you've done a lot of really good karmic relationship clearing here, or is
Perhaps, but I will say there's like 5 different like signs or like places in our charts that Venus goes retrograde, because she goes retrograde every year and a half.
Okay.
And so
But she
makes
retrogrades every year and a half, but then you said there's also an 8-year cycle.
But then it's every 8 years she's in that same place.
In your chart.
Okay. So she makes, it's called the Rose of Venus. It's this 5-pointed star that Venus makes at these retrograde node points.
Okay.
So we're at like the Venus, or we're at the, Aries Pisces one. So this one isn't super significant for everybody. Like in my personal life and story, this one's been very significant every 8 years. Some people, it might have been the one we got a year and a half ago, which was the summer of 2023 when it was in Leo.
Summer of 2023. Oh.
Like that. So, so like I would, this is just a complete like a guess, but I would guess that there's maybe like 1 or 2 that tend to have more significance for each person, depending on their chart and your like natal configurations and whatever, that tend to be more prominent in your life. And then the other ones maybe are just a little more like, I don't know, whatever. Like maybe once in a while there's like something big, but usually there's like 1 or 2 of those sets that like really hit you hard.
Okay. Yeah, I feel that. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to, I was really curious, just like karmic contracts and soul contracts, because what's your, I don't know, what's your like take or wisdom or any like research that you've like come to on that? Because we don't just have, they're not all like super karmic. Or are they all super karmic? I mean, I don't know. This is why I'm like, I'm just so curious, because we come in with soul contracts. We come here with people. So it's like, what are the varying categories or like degrees of those soul contracts?
I don't know. Any and all possibilities. I think.
What have you like experienced as you've done readings for people, I guess?
I feel like for most people, there is some semblance of karma that's being paid off on one end or the other or both in significant relationships for the most part. Or for the most part, that's often, I've seen that a lot. Or maybe there's not like a karmic debt owed to the other person, but they're like people that do just show up in your life that are like pushing you to evolve. Generally when like Pluto's involved and like a significant aspect to your chart, which is like the force of evolution, and it can come in like a wrecking ball at times. But Pluto represents the soul in a chart in like the realm of evolutionary astrology that I do. And so, there is, I would say, people can show up as just like big, like soul teachers in a way, helping to like push you out of like some like deeply seated psychological safety mechanisms that like you don't want to break out of. Like it's like helping you break out of some of these like patterns that feel like are like life or death kind of situations, and just
That's interesting. Something I've been reflecting on is like, as you're on a spiritual path, you ask for change into, I don't want to have these patterns anymore, and like thinking like, oh, that's great, but then it's like
they don't just poof go away.
The conduit to that is like,
then you get the experience.
Disruption is going to come in so that you can have this experience. And like, it's a lot more intense than I thought it was going to be. Because like you have to really, really face yourself. It's like, oh, you want this change? You want to get to where you're asking to go to and affect what you're asking to affect and like fully step into your dharma, then okay. You got to face yourself. And that's what that looks like. And it's been so.
If you want love, you're going to experience all the places you have.
Don't love yourself.
Not, and had hearts broken and family drama and repeated patterns of like emotional trauma and like the many ways that manifests. Or if you want to be like have more courage, you're gonna be faced with like some potentially like life or death terrifying situation to develop that and cultivate that. You want to be more patient, you're probably gonna like fall in love with somebody that drives you crazy. Like all of the things you ask for, you're gonna be put into situations where you're like forced to cultivate that.
So when it comes to the topic of like love, I was thinking about this earlier, and that whole concept of like finding the one. Like if we're all here with contracts, like what's your take on this? Like,
like soulmates?
Yeah, in a way. I know there's a difference between there's like soulmates, there's twin flames. I don't know. But soulmates, I guess.
I mean, for me at this point, all of them kind of fall into the category of soulmates.
Okay.
Which, when you ask for your soulmate to show up, it's because there's karma there.
But we think
it's not just this like blissed out honeymoon forever. It's like it might be that for a minute. Well, so if we're looking at somebody's chart, there is an arc of relationship in your chart that everybody has, and it's your 5th house through your 8th house. And so the 5th house, that's the house, traditionally it's the place of Leo, ruled by the sun, which in the physical body rules the heart. And so this is the honeymoon phase of like romance and pleasure and like creative inspiration and like joy and enthusiasm. And so like this is like how like this is like the first stage of like when you enter into a relationship with somebody.
Birthing a project or
it's things of creation. Children are also like 5th house kind of like area of topic and a chart. And so it's the birth of this relationship, which is always like really new and exciting, and like your heart feels like it's gonna like explode, and then it's like this is the best. And so then you get to the 6th house as the relationship develops and deepens, and that's the placement of Virgo, which is then like all of the daily like mundane tasks of like how do you do dishes together? How do you like organize your life in just like very like practical kind of earthy grounded matters, as well as just like, it's like this organizing principle of like, can you like tolerate and live with this person and not just like nitpick each other and like get
and
lost in the details and criticize and all of that. So that's kind of like a, resonance of like the minds as well, because it's ruled by Mercury. And so it's like you kind of have to like wrap your mind around like, well, how can this like actually like practically work? And like, how does this person like fit into my life in an organized way that makes sense to me, and vice versa. Then you get to the 7th house, which is the place of like one-on-one relationships and partnership. And that's like taking that next step into like commitment, basically. And that's like the space of Libra, which is like social contracts. So it is like the marriage contract, stuff like that. And also has to do with money, which is like, that like balancing of resources and stuff too. That one, it can, it's air, so it can get it's like, we can kind of get a little like spun around in some of that too. Kind of like the 5th house a little bit, but it's a little more just like, I don't know. There's more sharing, I would say. There's just like more communication happening, and like,
spin around, like things get more complicated because you're starting, because like deepening the commitment. And,
for sure. And there's just like more energy brought in, especially, I mean, if you do like go through the process of actually like getting legally married, it does bring in the entity of like the state on an energetic level into your partnership, which I learned that in a very interesting way when I got married. And I could like feel the like collective contract around that and like how it
Whoa.
shifted people's perceptions of me, how I felt within it, which was this definite like energetic box in a
Whoa.
way. It was trippy. So
Wow.
that's why I was like, well, that was good to know. Don't need to do that again.
Learned through that. I don't need to do that again. Great.
And then from there we get to the 8th house, which then is the realm of Scorpio, and that's like these like deeper intimacy. And then, but this is also where then like those like deeper cracks that are under the surface really start to show. I mean, it's the house of sex, death, shared resources, and like all of the taboo things that are just like hidden under the surface and like emotional and psychological landmines.
Yeah.
So that's the ultimate like transformation process of, can you go into your own dark night of the soul to like really transform yourself and then be able to show up in a deeper and stronger way with your partner and have them
do the
in
same
theory
thing.
do the same thing,
Instead
and then
of like
assume that you're
blaming and shaming and doing all these
right.
like outward, like you're the problem,
Yeah.
like, oh, you're going to trigger something within me. Okay, I'm going to point the finger at you, which actually it's just supposed to come right back here. But that's where our humanness comes in.
Mm-hmm. So it is that deeper transformation. And, you know, that's ultimately what, I mean, what a lot of people show up in relationships for is for that, whether they know it or not. But it's deeply challenging.
Yeah.
And, but it can also, you know, I think there is a level of like non-attachment that you will have to cultivate in that, because when you're going in those transformative processes, I mean, most people want to assume that their partner is going to like pop out at the end with them at the same place. And you have to be open to that not being the case. But that you were both supposed to like go into whatever process, like you came together and were able to go into this process and then be detached enough to like
let the process unfold as it will for each individual, because it's like, yeah,
and then
you
if you can come back together in a new way, then that's like deepening and strengthening the relationship. But
that letting go and that detachment, that's hard for me.
It's hard for most people.
Yeah.
It triggers all of the deep dark wounds of the soul and or like little inner children and hearts and all of that.
I'm like very intimately in that right now. I just went through the grief ceremony that Shanti and all of them just did. Amazing. Beautiful.
I heard a little bit about that.
So have you ever been to one of them?
No, they're always on my birthday weekend. And
I'm like, you're like,
I don't do that. Do a lot of that throughout the year.
Sure.
So we'll see what 44 brings.
Yeah, that was such an interesting experience. And actually, as I was going, I mean, you know, energy like that starts working from the moment you buy a ticket or decide to go. And so, but leading up to it, it started to get pretty intense in my world. And I was just like reflecting on my childhood, because I've been, you know, it's been a process of working with my inner child over the last few years, like number one, acknowledging her and then actually starting to like work with her. But then I realized I was like, I've had so much resistance towards actually looking at pictures of my younger self, especially around like age 5 and age 7. One of my favorite podcasters, Deja Blue podcast, she talks about how she has a picture of her 5-year-old self on her altar. And she's like, the only thing she ever tries to do every day in her life is to just make her happy. Like that's the only person she ever needs to answer to is her 5-year-old self. And I've always found that so beautiful. And then realizing that like I can talk to my inner child and I can like acknowledge when her and other parts are coming up, and also like I can't look at her. And so this was all coming up and through right before the grief ceremony. And I had actually texted my mom and I was like, hey, will you send me some pictures? And not expecting them to come through as fast as they did. And as I was driving into Unity, they came through and I got to look at them and I was just like, well, and she actually sent me from age, I think it was age like 2 to age 9. And it was very hard. to look at, especially from like age 5 to age 7, and kind of watch the spirit leave in a ways the way I've been describing it, and then kind of see myself go more downhill as I got like 7, 8, and 9. You know, I know how things shifted after that. So, but yeah, to actually be able to visually see the change, but then like, okay, how can I focus in on this younger version of myself to help heal her? Because that's so much of like what has been coming up for me. So it's deep wounds of abandonment and all these.
Well, that's been the whole Mars retrograde cycle too, which it just started moving forward out of like the shadow degrees, which Mars in Cancer. I mean, it's been at the station degree for the last month.
Oh, that would make a lot.
But it went retrograde beginning in December. And so, but that Mars in Cancer is like all of like the hurt, wounded, like childhood experiences. And basically watching the ways that the collective runs around as like basically injured little children.
In adult bodies.
Just projecting their hurt little children all around the world. And so there is like this process of reparenting that Mars in Cancer has been bringing up, if you have that perspective on it. And yeah, I think, it just started to actually like move forward now. So I'm curious how that starts to like integrate more.
Yeah. It feels easier to, I don't know if easier is the word, but lighter to kind of tap into like, okay, what does she need and how can I repair her and how can I show up to this space instead of it just being like, oh, okay, now like, how can I take action? Like, what does it look like to bring these elements of childlike play and wonder and not from like a childish adult kind of trying to force it, you know, which I've definitely seen people do. But this actually like, no, like, how can I nurture this space from a very like genuine, authentic.
And I think creativity is like the key word there, because Mars is that like creative force, you know? And so it's like, whether it's making art or writing or, you know, something that like you used to enjoy as a child, like how can you like start revisiting that and see what comes through? I'd be really curious to see too, like as you do that, if you can actually look at those photos and like see the life force like returning back to that earlier version of you, because there's no space and time. Like you can restore that.
Yeah. Well, that's what I want to do. And I think that's why it's been so hard to look at those pictures, because that's like, once I do acknowledge it and look into her eyes, then I can't not confront it. I can't not do something about it. And so it's like I've been saying like, oh yeah, I want to do this, but now I'm actually have been given the spaciousness to do it, because we're in that space of inward reflection and really focusing in on those core wounds. And I'm like, yeah, like I'm ready to really move forward into this world, into like what I'm meant to do, and like really step forward into that space. And I realize, and like, whether it's in my personal life or my professional life, and like the only way that I can truly do that in a way that is authentic and aligned is by not dealing with, but, you know, acknowledging this space within me that is so hurt and so wounded. And it's like, and she's driving so much.
Yeah, it's like giving truck keys to a 4-year-old.
Bad ideas.
Terrible.
Bad ideas.
Yeah, the other thing too, just like astrological context for growing up, you know, like 6, 7 is when we get the first Saturn square to like our natal Saturn, which Saturn is that like big developmental cycles, because everybody pretty much at this point knows their Saturn return around 29. 28 to 30, depending. But that first Saturn square, which is like 6, 7, is that first like reckoning of like kind of the harsh realities of the world, and like this first process of like separation of like identity. And that's such a key transformative age that for so many people is like the first real deep set in of like trauma.
Yeah.
Whether that's, I mean, there's so many different ways that can come in, whether it's spiritually, and like ancestral stuff that just like dumps in, or just like family stuff starts to really come out, or stuff at school, whatever. But those are, that's really that first Saturn square, which then like, then it's about 14 or so when you get like the Saturn opposition, which is the hell realm of high school.
Yeah.
And really like that opposition of Saturn of starting to get like then pushback from like your like peers, and like just like really
But like trying to be yourself,
harsh, like reflect. Yeah. And it's just like, it's
yeah.
so confusing and like uncomfortable. And then 21-ish is like the third, or the second square, the third quarter square, which is kind of another like crisis turning point usually, of like kind of the first experience then of like gritting to have some freedom, but like kind of feeling lost as far as like real direction, or like really having like the structure yet to like really like forge a solid path.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Saturn return is one, this is actually the period where like in the first 29 years of life, you're living out your past life karma.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like 29, when you get the Saturn return, that's when you can start to actually like pay off karma, and start to like actually create a life that becomes freer and freer of the past life karma.
Yeah. And hopefully not incur more.
Yeah. Ideally.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it's like when we are like, our soul comes down to be born here, it's resonating at like a specific frequency that once it matches like the planetary bodies of where they are in the sky for what that soul needs to learn, and it like resonates like the music of the spheres, the planetary bodies like matches that. It's like that resonance is also that your soul's holding is also then like vibrating and matching with like an ancestral lineage held by your parents, and that's how that all like comes together. And that's like the family you're born into, as well as your natal chart.
Wow.
Are all that like resonance of what that soul is. And so that's how we're born. And then it's once you hit the Saturn return, you can actually start to like do the necessary work and change like what your life is from that point forward.
You actually get to start like creating your life instead of just paying off debt.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say there's like continual karmic payout always, because we always have the South Node going through our chart somewhere.
Well, you also have this opportunity to make new choices from a different space.
Yeah, and just like greater perspective, ideally.
Hopefully not doing the same things. Yeah.
Yeah.
That you did again, so that you get to like, I mean, that's how, because I turned 31 this year. So like I'm just entering into that space, right? And I definitely felt it. Everyone was telling me, they were like, oh, your 30s are so much better. And I was like, I hope so. And also like, it does feel like this. And like, even though, there's definitely still like shadowy things and stuff that are coming up and through, I do feel this greater like creative force. And even through all of that, it's like, it's a testament to the work that I've done over the years, but also like when big life things are happening that would in the past emotionally not even just drain me, but like distort me to a place where it's like I couldn't even, like live really. It's like going through those, and at the same time, like this podcast is a great example, creating in the midst of all of it, and like feeling so joyful to do that, and having something to be able to put my energy into, while also not shoving that stuff to the side, but like being with all of that and allowing that to take up space, and also continually creating my life, just like letting it all intermingle. It's beautiful. It's also very painful.
It's all messy. But that's what art and creation are as well.
Yeah.
So
painting outside the lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a wild journey. So, okay, so we're in this eclipse, which is just the start of eclipse season. But then we have, okay, so when does this one end?
This eclipse season?
This eclipse that we're going into right now, tomorrow.
So we have the lunar eclipse tomorrow night, and then we have the solar eclipse on the 28th.
Okay.
28th.
Okay.
So it's those two, and then
Okay.
it's like by the next lunation after that in 2 weeks, which would be like the next full moon, which would be like mid-April, which is also when Venus goes direct. Mercury's direct by then. That's when things should start to kind of like settle into the new places from like everything that just got like boggled. I call it cosmic boggle, where it's just like everything, there's a button pushed and then everything just kind of explodes. And like, it's really interesting too with this Venus energy and Mercury. Like I feel like there's a big like shift of like alliances and allegiances happening right now too. Which I mean, you see like collectively with just the circus of politics and whatever.
Yeah.
But in the real world, I would keep like, I'd be curious to like, just like think about maybe there's different, just kind of a shifting of like people in your life and see who's like resonating out and who starts to show up in new ways. Ideally, not till mid-April once Venus is direct. You have a little more like for clarity as far as like
who's really gonna
who's
stick
really
around,
gonna make it
who are
maybe
like the aligned ones. Yeah. Okay.
and be resonating in that new place that you land.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else like
just like sitting still until April, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, as slow as they can and like massive blow-ups and changes.
But like honoring yourself mostly through it all, because it's like,
I mean, they're both, if you think about it in like the mythological kind of process of like Venus and Mercury are both going on their underworld journeys too. So it's there is like a retreat to the inner realm more that's happening too. Which is a like deeply sacred place within oneself. And so, I think there is, I don't know, just like kind of withdrawing from some of like just the patterns of like the ways you are and showing up in relationships. And maybe that looks like taking more time alone to really allow that process to happen. With less interference, less interruptions. And then also like letting your mind, which is the Mercury retrograde and like kind of communication, like retreat a bit to whether that look, doing more journaling and just like less talking, which is
just a lot of self-reflection.
Just more reflection and
hermiting, kind of in a way. Yeah.
That's a natural thing for me.
Pretty easy for me. I also get in this state, like what feels so alive. Is like, okay, I'm in this hermit mode and I recognize my relational patterns in all the ways. And I'm like, okay, so it's like, just don't do those. And yet like my brain is still so much focused on the other so much. And so in that,
like what it's missing and
all the things. And it's like what I keep telling myself is I'm like, just in this 10 seconds, like don't do what you would have done before. And then the next 10 seconds, I'm like, don't do what you would have done.
It is very much a moment to moment process of change, I would say. Especially with Aries, because it's kind of just like
which is like what we were saying at the beginning, where I'm like, it's one moment here, one moment here, one moment here, one moment here. It's like breathe. Do it all. What else is like significantly happening besides our big eclipse that we're going through? That we should be prepared for. Like put our armor on.
So, another thing that's with the Venus retrograde, and there's so many different facets to it. So astronomically, Venus before the retrograde, like this was mid-January, she reached her like um, brightest illumination of the night sky as the evening star, which everybody probably saw. It was like really intense.
Yeah, I do remember that
Um,
night actually. Yeah.
And I mean, it was for like, a period of weeks. Like, I think it was mid-January. It was like the brightest. They call it the maximum elongation, which is about 50 days before it goes retrograde. But then it's been slowly like, it's still been bright in the sky. You can still see her for sure, but it's definitely been like dimming as she gets closer to the sun now. And then now that I think she is or about to like completely disappear behind the sun for a period of time, which is that underworld journey of like going in. And I mean, it's like associated with the story of Persephone going into
Yes.
the underworld to reclaim like what power was stolen or was like broken off or left there, kind of like soul retrieval process, basically, to reclaim that power. And then before she's direct, I want to say it's like beginning of April, she'll start to emerge as the morning star, like in the early morning sky. And so Venus in the morning star phase, which will be continuing to build in light and intensity, reaching maximum elongation again in her brightness, like greatest brightness in the morning sky around June 1st. Venus as the morning star embodies that like feminine warrior energy. So the evening star Venus, which we had this winter, was like the evening star, which is much more of that like Aphrodite and like kind of like the just typical like Venusian goddess, like very receptive and like much more in like the feminine receptivity and like much more relaxed and all about just like pleasure and parties and fun and all of that. Morning star Venus is like, she went through the underworld journey. She's like back with her power and she's ready to fuck shit up.
Yeah, like don't fuck with me.
Yeah. And like, yeah, warrior princess.
Love that.
Queen.
Love that.
So that's like more of the energy that's going to come out of this too for everybody, because we all have Venus. We all have like this divine feminine working within ourselves. So I would say we come out of it with much stronger and clearer boundaries of like what we allow in relationships. Stronger, more authentic like sense of self with and like embodying that in like our value systems.
And actually like holding boundaries with that and not being so like wishy-washy about it.
Yeah, and like, there is just like because she's crossing over the North Node, which is at the end of Pisces right now too, and Neptune, which is also the higher frequency of Venus. So there is like this alignment that is happening with like the greater force of creation and like our kind of like collective evolutionary point right now too. So I think there is like a greater spiritualization of value systems across the board. What that looks like in reality, again, it's like highlighting all of the ways that that's not the case. But there is, I think, I don't know, for me, it's just helping to really cultivate a deeper trust in like what relationships, I don't know, I guess like what relationships look like when we get through this period. They're going to be at a different like resonance that have, I feel like, a stronger bond on like a spiritual level.
Yeah.
Which might mean fewer.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But then there's going to be new people that show up in that with you as well.
Yeah. There's kind of like a softness to it as I tune into it as well. I mean, because like if it's a lie, like I'm thinking like if these are like the more aligned relationships, there's a more like relaxed.
There's more harmony and ease.
There we go.
But it's also like, yeah. It could be your apocalypse posse really comes together.
Cool. Kind of what it feels like. I'm like, we're all like getting our
canning friends.
Yeah, exactly. I was reflecting on that today, like everyone in our kind of like posse and community of like, who makes bread, who does massage, who does this, who does that, who does the herbalism, who does the astrology, like all that. And I'm like, we're good here. I'm like, we got our
a lot of
people.
skills.
Like, there's a lot of skills. Yeah, I feel very like blessed to be a part of our community. And I'm like, bring it up. We're good. We got it. Bring it. We're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. Humans have just like stumbled along throughout history for so long of like kind of just figure it out.
Yeah.
That seems to be the best like governing principle as well. Like,
I mean, that's what we're all doing every moment of every day is just figuring it out. And so like even leaders, it's just like you have no idea what you're doing half the time. So it's like,
no.
yeah.
No.
Just walking each other home, as Ram Dass says.
Yeah. What else? I think I already maybe mentioned this actually with Neptune going into Aries and like this whole Venus retrograde, that being the higher frequency of Venus. Neptune is that is the divine, that is the frequency of divine love, which Venus is like the lower frequency that we show up with in our messy human inner relationship.
I didn't know the difference there. Okay.
So again, yeah, so there is this like big shift in that. And I was listening to Austin Coppock, one of my favorite astrologers, talk about when Neptune changes signs, it like shifts the energy of the collective dream, which we've had 14 years in Pisces, which has been, we've seen this like explosion of like spirituality and metaphysics and like all of that kind of stuff. A lot of, music and art. I mean, yeah, and like also I would say like mind expansion with like, being in Oregon, like mushrooms and like psychedelic therapy and the healing properties of those, like whether in like MDMA and ketamine, like very
people
like
going off to do ayahuasca.
Yeah, but also like, medicines that are very like dissolving of boundaries, which is very Neptunian Pisces energy too. So shifting into Aries, he talks about there is like a collective dream shift into this more like fucking like warrior archetype.
Wow. Okay.
And there's, a whole spectrum of like what that's going to look like. But that's, like I said before, a little bit of that Crusades energy for people that have that kind of perspective on the world. But then on a more expanded level, I think it's also bringing in a lot of new like potentials and possibilities that are really going to like break open old paradigms that have been around for a long time too. I mean, I hate the word innovation because it's so corrupted, but there is something of that, of like sparking new inspiration and like creativity for different kinds of thinking for the problems that we've created. That's like completely invisible. Like we can't even see like where these things would be coming from or what they're going to look like.
Wow.
So that gives me a little bit of hope.
Just got a little
just a little bit. You don't want too much. You get lost in the sauce.
Yeah. Wow.
But I think also it's going to, just like new different kinds of art, different kinds of drugs people are into. Let's not let speed make a comeback.
No, absolutely not. More dog energy.
Yeah, Henry.
Yeah, this is a big, I mean, we knew coming into this year, like the Aquarian age is a whole new age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say like burnout is a very real thing too, with all of this like Aries, Pisces, Aries energy too. It's just like, it's a lot. It's just like, it's burning a lot of energy for people.
Yeah.
So, really being able to take care of yourself and
rest is productive.
Yeah. And like, just give yourself breaks.
And grace.
And grace.
So much. The Gene Key Pulse that they released for this week was think it's the 22nd. You're like, yeah.
That's my life's work.
Oh my gosh.
I have it.
What's the that one.
Yeah.
So it's
Mountain over fire.
the shadow is
Dishonor.
Dishonor into graciousness, into grace.
Mm-hmm. Which is achieved through suffering.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Which I did write. I have a Substack blog that I do like zodiacal, monthly zodiacal astro reports. And
what's that called? Your Substack?
It's still
I'll
under
link to it
the
too.
old name, Heart-Wrench Musings. It's changing because my whole website and everything changed.
Okay. We'll put links in the show notes for everything.
But I did write about how, like, you know, suffering is an inevitable part of the process of transformation. And we've been collectively so conditioned in this last 100 years, I'd even say, to like that suffering means there's something wrong. And we just want to be comfortable all the time.
Yeah.
And that's just not a reality.
No.
So I think there's going to be like, the more you can accept that and like even just start a practice of introducing like uncomfortable things into your life a little bit. It's like little homeopathic remedies to like really start to strengthen yourself, because
so when the big things come in, it's not so much
it's
of
not
like a jarring.
Yeah, you don't just like
experience.
Shut down or whatever that would look like. But
it's interesting. Something I've been playing with recently is I mean, on the topic of like grief, right? Like I'll have just like allowing it to flow through nowadays more than I used to. I used to repress it a lot. But when I have like these periods of like feeling really good and aligned and everything, like if I have like time at home or a day or something that I was not planned, like I might like induce that actually and like welcome that space. I'm like, is there anything here? Kind of like the grief ceremony is like, this is a space to like welcome these things in. It wasn't, you know, just a natural process. Like this is a container for that to come up and through. So instead of getting comfortable in these spaces of like, yes, I love that everything's going great right now. And also there's like totally stuff here to work through. So inviting it in.
I also just have a tendency is like, as soon as something's going good, I'm like, what's wrong?
You're gonna drop. Like, are we okay?
I have a lot of Virgo energy that's always just like on alert of like, wait, what's happening?
Yeah.
What?
Can we trust
I don't trust this. There's something wrong. Working on that. Yeah.
I think the programming partner, I might be wrong on this, is the 55th J key. I don't know if I remember. I don't remember either. It's not my life's work, but it is prevalent in my chart.
Oh, cool.
Just thinking about it. But yeah, all those intricacies I'm still trying
There's
to
so
remember.
much there.
There's so much there.
Yeah.
I love it. But yeah, so much. It's really...
That's another, you know, just the suffering thing. That is like a huge signature of Pisces, which is like the sacred act of suffering, which is like that huge sacrifice to return back to God, source, great spirit, whatever word you want to use. It is an incredible, like, painful sacrifice that ultimately we all do return to when we die. But it's like, how can you do that when you're still living and like making those practices? Like years ago here, I went to a death ceremony. What's that? Doula Cheryl? Anyways, it was like basically you like planned your own funeral.
Oh my God.
And like went through and like then you like laid down and everybody like read your like eulogy and like you went through like the death process.
Whoa.
It was incredible.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that might be a fun
on that
Venus retrograde activity with your friends.
Whoa.
Just have a funeral party for everybody. Real underworld journey kind of vibe.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's been transformational.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Pisces Pisces season is always a struggle for me. Every time it comes around, I'm like,
What's your rising?
Sag.
Because that
Moon in
Interesting.
Taurus and Capricorn. Yeah.
it's it's squaring
Yeah.
your ascendant, but
Yeah.
it'd be what my brain is
That's
10th
okay.
house.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be the 10th house angle. It's a very like visible place in your chart for a very vulnerable sign.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's why it's like every time Pisces season comes around, I'm like,
You're on the stage.
and then, like, I do settle into it at one point, but then I'm like, at first I'm just like, fuck that. I feel like I should just start like retreating for the first, I don't know.
That's Leo season for me.
You're
Midsummer, I'm like, I'm out.
Yeah.
All these people having fun and enjoying their lives. I'm just like, I'm going to
No.
live in a cave for a month.
That's fair. That's fair. Like, I know I'm going to be triggered by it, so like, I don't need to visually see it. I'm just going to go be with it. It's fine.
Sorry, are hard.
Yeah. Wow.
I asked that because Leo's my 12th house. And so it's like, it is that place where it's like that the deepest like unconscious, which is also, it's also that Pisces realm.
Yeah.
But that's when I'm like, this is when I want to be like doing like deep inner work, and like the whole world is just like out, like externalizing all of their energy everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
Oh, contain that. Wait a minute. Stop that right now. That would be so frustrating. I mean, like Leo energy in general, I feel like is so beautiful. I feel like I'm kind of envious of it.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
I have
but I also
some
get really
Leo
challenged
envy for sure.
Yeah. I'm just like, how do you do?
Mm-hmm.
How do you just exist like that? Like, can I
just like
have some of that?
Confident.
Yeah.
Enjoy life.
Yeah. I'm like, it's one of those manifestations where sometimes it feels like everything comes so easy, which I know is not.
They have their own things.
Yeah,
Everybody does,
of course. But from a distance perspective,
Yeah.
when I look at and when you don't get to know people on a personal level, I'm just like, seems like life is just handed itself to you in some way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the sun is the natural ruler of Leo, so people that are Leo suns, there's definitely things that can like impede that, but there is just a natural like vitality and presence and like comfort in their own skin that they have.
That.
Sometimes to a fault.
Yeah.
But ultimate, like, yeah. Henry agrees.
He does.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything as we start to just kind of like wrap up that feels alive to share? Any other like wisdom messages?
I would say, so one of the, on top of astrology, as you said, I bring in herbal medicine to that realm as well.
Used, and it's great. Amazing.
But like really my true joy these days, which there's very few, is blending herbalism and astrology, which is not new. It's been around for a very long time. It was separated a couple 150 years ago or so. Look up the Flexner Report. Published around 1913.
Okay.
But well, it happened before that, but that was a big turning point. But like 500 years ago, all of the physicians were astrologers, and all of the alchemists, and there was no real separation of that. And so,
everyone worked together to help heal people on a holistic level. Crazy.
And didn't have giant corporations constructed upon people being sick.
Crazy. Wow. Oh, we survived.
Amazing we've made it this far. So yeah, like, there's some plants that definitely come to mind that can like maybe help through some of these periods of time that we're in right now. One I wrote about specifically for Pisces season, but just it feels like with all of the eclipses and like bringing up karmic past stuff and Venus retrograde and all of that. Ella Campaign is one, which is this beautiful sunshiny yellow flower, but you use the roots and getting tincture or tea, like, doing a little like ceremony and journey with it. This is a plant that has a lot of like fairy elvish lore with it. It's very magical.
Ooh.
But one of its signatures is that it works with like cosmic homesickness and that like Piscean kind of like never really, I don't know. For me, like there's definitely a thing with Pisces of like never really feeling at home here because it's like there is like a resonance or remembrance of home from another dimension or star or wherever.
I can resonate with that.
And I think, anybody that has like strong Piscean or even Aquarius signatures in their chart could really feel that. So this can really work with connecting you to like your source, which is that Piscean return to source sort of energy. And can help, just like it brings some like vitality and like aliveness to something that maybe you haven't like been able to access or really feel before. And so then it like what it's doing in the physical body, it's working through like the deepest layers of the lungs, which is where we store grief. And there's many layers to the lungs. And so it's like when you work with that plant, it's reaching like these deeper places where that grief has been stored, buried. I mean, and it like a spiritual grief and energetic grief that it can access and like bring up to process and feel and clear. So that's one. I mean, rose, of course, is always an amazing heart ally for its softening, but then also its like protection when you're in like deep, vulnerable spaces of healing.
I tell you, I just started to like really work with rose energy, which is so beautiful. I love Rebecca Campbell's oracle cards, and I've wanted her rose deck for so long.
I remember you talking about that. Yeah.
And I just picked it up maybe like 2 weeks ago or so from Lindsay's store. And so I've been actively working with that. And like I was house sitting at a friend's house like just a week ago and was like reading the whole, first part of the book about it, and bought myself some roses for the first time ever, I think. And they've just like been they've just like been there, and I use the deck every single day. And just tapping into that, and you're like actually really getting to tap into that energy feels so
that's amazing.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So and divinely timed, of course, always.
Well, as you said that, I was like, oh, it's interesting. Like, so if we talk about like Venus evening star, it'd be like the soft, like beautiful rose petals, and then Venus morning star and like the warrior is like the thorns and like the protection and fierceness that like you have to have the balance of both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ocotillo is another favorite plant of mine, which does not grow around here, but it's from like Arizona, New Mexico area, Southwest deserts. But it's this really crazy alien, spindly, tall cactus plant that grows out in the deserts. And there's so many things to it. One, it's a really beautiful heart medicine. And just like really centers your like consciousness in the heart. And can do a lot of like deep healing there. It's again returning like movement and fluidity to places that have been like frozen from trauma and abuse. And can really help to like go into some of the shadow realms of like the ways the feminine's been wounded, which is a perfect Venus retrograde time to like look at some of that. And the ways that like feminine powers just used in manipulation from all people. Or if that's been used against you, it can be a really powerful ally to help heal some of that. It also helps us with processing repressed rage and anger that needs to be cleared out of the heart and body and liver. Um, and yeah, that's one. I have several preparations of that I've made. And I mean, they all touch those key things in their own way. But that's been a huge ally in the last like 8 years of my journey for sure.
Yeah, that sounds really amazing.
Get
me some of that.
Gotcha.
I was like,
For sure. Oregon grape would be another one that comes to mind, Oregon grapefruit, because especially with the eclipse and like all of the South Node Virgo energy, Virgo and Mercury are like, it's also like the process of digestion. Virgo and Mercury both rule like the intestines and then also somewhat the liver in medical astrology. And so there is this like process of digestion that is how karma is being paid out for the next year and a half with the South Node going through Virgo. And so, really taking care of and like making sure that these things aren't getting stuck and stagnant, that we do have like on every level, whether it's emotional digestion, physical digestion. But like there's a lot of stuff like moving through the gut right now that really needs to be like cared for. Because when you're looking at a chart in like the body realm, the South Node is the weakest part because that's where karma is getting paid out through. And so for everybody, that is the gut and the liver pretty much this next year and a half. So Oregon grape is a really amazing plant to help with those digestive processes. And like I use it in bitters formulas to help with like, just keeping things moving and, helps with any like inflammation and any like little pathogen invaders of bacteria and such things like that get out of balance. It can help rebalance that. Yeah. So.
All that plant allies. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like also, like working with the body and astrology too. I mean, I work a lot with like gem and flower essences because they're working more on like the spiritual and emotional body too. So if you don't have like, physical things necessarily that need to be addressed, but like the essences are really amazing ways to start working on some of the more like energetic parts of stuff.
Okay.
And can be used as like they're great adjuncts to all other kinds of therapy too, and because they're vibrational medicines, like you can pair them with a lot of other things that maybe like physical tinctures and stuff you need to be a little more careful with. But
yeah. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Grateful you're here and bringing all your insights and wisdom. There's so much going on. I mean, I feel a lot more grounded and more just like,
like we're in the calm before the storm really breaks.
That's almost like, all right, now I know how to at least kind of like, all is well, like approach it. Like, I'm probably going to re-listen to this like a gazillion times when I'm like going off the rails, like, okay, just, it's going to be fine.
I mean, it's just big changes. And for me, I know they're, even though like I can look ahead and like know the astrology and like see potential ways that's going to play out in my own chart, like I still have to go through those experiences.
Yeah.
At least with this, you can have a little more context to understand and like maybe have a little less suffering in the process of it, or just like deeper understanding so you can like know that there's change and light at the end of the tunnel.
And that's like, that deeper understanding is what helps make some like, okay, I'm like pretty good at like riding the waves now and going with the flow. And I'm like, and I know it's all going to level out at some point, but there's also like, when our brain does its brain
crazy things.
Crazy. Oh, I was so grateful that we had this plan to record very last minute tonight because
It's
I
perfect.
was in a weird state earlier. Like, it's just the greatest
It's
thing
been
to
some
do.
weird days.
Weird days.
Last 2 days, 2 nights ago, I woke up at 3:33 and was just awake. This morning, I woke up at 4:44, wide awake. I'm like, maybe tomorrow's 5:55.
Yeah, like maybe we'll get some more sleep. Okay, fine.
Another hour, please.
Well, yeah, there's big stuff at play right now.
Mm-hmm. Here for it.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Grateful for you.
Likewise.
Yeah. See ya, palette.
Oh yeah.
I'm good. Getting all the medicine goods.
Mm-hmm.
Where so I guess if people who are not local to us and don't have you are listening, where like do they just find an herbalist near them or
Ideally, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Apothecary.
if you have like a local apothecary, with some sharp discernment, there are some good medicine makers that sell things like on Etsy.
That's the
But
thing.
there's
Like you want to be
you really
discerning
need
with
to
online stuff.
Yeah, you need to be really discerning with
I
that.
don't want to just like get anything because
I mean, Gaia herbs, wise women herbs are pretty like good. I mean, then there's like mountain rose herbs as
Mountain
well.
Rose
You
herbs
can
is
get a
great.
lot from them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would
People
say
don't have magical Jasmine in their life. How do we access these medicines?
you can always just email me on my website as well. I'll send you a list of things. And I do have a good herbalist friend in Tucson, and he also has like the desert medicines like Ocotillo and stuff.
Mhm.
Desert Tortoise Botanicals is the name of it. And I can definitely vouch for what he makes.
Awesome. Cool.
So, yeah.
Okay, go get your plant medicines and we're just gonna ride this out together.
It'll be so much fun.
It's gonna be great. It's gonna be so much fun.